So where were we?
Where were we? Well, I've written down some questions this time that we got asked.
Before that, did you have a wonderful Christmas?
We were just completely alone, weren't we?
We don't bother with Christmas, do we?
You got me some nice presents.
Yeah, but we don't bother with it, do we? It's not bar humbug. Most of my family live in Australia, so I've got a brother and two sisters that are still down in Grimsby. Don't really see or hear anything of my sisters anymore, but can contact daily with my brother via telegram.
Messages. And my lot are all in Glasgow. I don't know why, because growing up in Edinburgh, Glasgow is the rival city, but they all migrated over to the dark side, and I migrated to an island. Yeah, so we had a very quiet one. I guess both of us just kind of shy away from the commercial nature of it.
When you've got kids, or you're around kids, as in if you're with your extended family, then Christmas makes sense. If it's just the two of you.
From my perspective, I think it's an important time to see family and hang out and talk about relevant things. That's more and more difficult now, I think, because of the nature of the stuff that's on telly. It's not wholesome at all. All I want to do is sit and watch The Railway Children, 1970 edition, Jenny Agutter and Susan Sarandon and Little Women. Pretend I live in a different time where everyone's values are different and morals are different from a more Christian perspective. But you can't. I find it difficult. I find it a difficult time of year to be out in the world unless I'm visiting family and friends.
When I was a kid, or even when I like a very young man, congregating around the TV at certain times during Christmas Day was still a thing. The way that it always worked, well, it didn't always work, but let's say when my grandparents were still alive. So my grandparents died, within a year or two of each other, and they were the hub of the family, and everybody would congregate round there on Christmas evening. That was a ritual. When my grandparents died, that central hub disappeared, and then it kind of shattered the whole family, because my mother and stepfather then moved to Australia, where all of her siblings were already living. There was no hub. There was no place to congregate to, and then everybody just started doing their own thing more and more and more. We've never really been a family that spends a lot of time together, but we did at Christmas, which is most families.
Yeah, for some families it's the only time of year really they really get to see each other and spend time together, whether that's a good thing or not.
We never had any issues. There were never any. I think every now and again, my gran might have a bit too much of the whiskey, and she might get a bit more. But that wasn't all the time. That was just once in a while. But yeah, we never had any rows or anything. But can you remember what your favourite Christmas present was when you were a kid?
A doll. I must have been about 8, and she was about the size of my torso, and she had thick blonde hair. She was very beautiful. I loved her hair. And something went wrong with her. I can't remember what, but we had to take her back to the shop, exchange it for a different doll. Didn't have the same one. I was heartbroken. I cried and cried and cried. I loved her.
Then why didn't you just keep her?
I don't know why. I can't remember.
I actually can't remember. If you were to ask me what my favourite Christmas present was, there were toys that I got that I remember playing with, but to actually a specific, I think the most monumental was getting a bike.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one for loads of people, isn't it?
Well, because there was 6 of us, my mother and father and the 4 kids. Money wasn't in abundance, so we always had presents. But getting a bike was a big deal, and me and my brother got one on the same year. So I don't know where they got the money from for that, but we both got a bike.
Did your dad teach you?
No.
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 You taught yourselves?
Yes. Yeah, 100% taught ourselves.
Yeah.
Just so people know, my father was a sergeant in the military police, so he was very rarely around, and we were all over the shop from the point of view of where we lived. Northern Ireland, loads of different places in northern Germany, ended up in Berlin. But obviously, because of the nature of his work, he wasn't like, in a sense, he wasn't a hands-on father, because he was always busy. He was always away. He was always working. So yeah, things like learning to ride a bike was pretty much on our own. And what I distinctly remember about that bike is it was too big for me when I got it, and falling off it and kicking the living crap out of it. Like it was the bike's fault.
That sounds like you.
And my mum, one time when she caught me doing it, she went mad. Because, well, it's just, just the frustration of like, you want to ride your bike, but first of all, you've got to learn how to ride your bike. And we were I'm guessing that we were quite late to it, considering we're most kids. I don't know. Whenever I recall stories like this, as a kid, I always think I'm between 8 and 10. It's like every single thing happened to me when I was between 8 and 10, which obviously wasn't the case. But I think I must have been about 9 when I got that bike. But then again, we was also late learning to swim. Because of the nature of our lives and not living in the UK for a lot of the period of time, we were constantly moving. When your father's in the military police, every 2 years you would move to a different place. And you wouldn't move with the regiments, you would move on your own. So during that period, all the regiments would move during like a 2-3 month period together. So you would keep the same friends because you would all go to different places at different times. Whereas with the military police, you were on your own. So every 2 years, it was brand new place, brand new people, brand new schools, brand new friends. Even as a kid, that was getting tedious after a while.
It's probably why you and your brother are so close.
I don't know. I think it was over a 10-12 year period. I can't remember exactly what it was, how long he was in the army for. But Christmases were always really cool when we were kids. It was a very special day, and like I said, we always got presents, and then we'd always get packages that were sent, from the UK. But I cannot tell you. I don't know if the bike was my favourite present. I got some Star Wars toys once, and I also remember getting when I was a kid the Action Man dolls, but it was a $6 million man, Bionic Man.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that to me before.
Steve Austin.
I
loved that.
Was that what you were talking about the other
That's what I showed
morning?
you on YouTube.
Bionic Man.
Yeah, it was. I did play with that quite a lot. He came with his own little spaceship. I remember playing with that quite a lot.
Like a regeneration pod.
Yeah, something like that. But so a doll, that's it. There's nothing else. There's no other Christmas reminiscences.
We were raised Catholic. I'm not Catholic anymore, but Christmas always consisted of midnight mass, and then you come home, and.
But isn't that's December 24th? That's Christmas Eve.
But it was part of it. I remember one Christmas, we went to the Pantomime and came back, and there were presents everywhere, which weren't there when we left, and that was really magic. The way my parents had orchestrated that.
But what was the last pantomime you went to?
I don't remember.
I remember mine.
So the Americans probably won't have seen
What
any pantomime. They don't have panto over there, do they?
I went to see Cannonball in Babes in the Wood.
Yeah, I saw Babes in the Wood.
2014 that was, and it was hilarious. People in the US have got no idea what Cannonball were, but there were comedy acts in the UK who were massive during the early 70s right the way through the 80s, and they spent every Christmas for about a decade doing pantomime in Lincoln. And I just happened to go. I thought, I'm going to get a ticket to go and see them, and it was hilarious. It was very funny. Pantomime
tends to be so it's in a theatre, and it's not like a movie theatre, like an auditorium. It tends to be something like Cinderella or something like Sleeping Beauty, one of those stories, and it's all about audience participation, basically. So there are traditions surrounding it. There's always a pantomime dame, which is actually a man dressed up in very silly clothing. There's always a very beautiful woman and a very hunky man in the lead role. There's lots of silly supporting characters. There's always a ghastly villain, and you have things like yeah, things you shout out as the audience, you know, for example, someone on stage will say, "Oh
It's
no!"
behind you.
Yeah, you shout that it's behind you when the villain's creeping up behind them, and somebody on the stage will say, "Oh no, it isn't," and everyone shouts, "Oh yes, it is."
It's linked.
Mad.
It's linked to old music hall because there's loads of songs all the way through. So vaudeville in the US, it's that, but it's taken to an extreme in its comedy, and it's meant for kids. Kids go to this as well and participate, but there's also loads of
Adult humour.
jokes in there that only adults will get, which keeps them entertained. So moving on, have you got some questions? I see that you've got a notepad in front of you, so I'm guessing that's got questions on it.
Well, carrying on from our last conversation, Janice asked us 2 questions which we can actually roll into one answer. Where and what did we do on our first date, and what was the first meal I cooked for you?
I've got no idea what the first meal you cooked for me was.
Well, it was on the first date. It was
it?
Yeah, we had a picnic, remember? That I brought.
You didn't really cook it, did you? You didn't like take a little Calagas heater out there
How
and
did
like
you know?
a pan.
I could have lovingly kneaded that bread and made you that little pickled cheese sandwich.
I just remember that there was
Pickled cheese?
pickled onion and cheese.
Cheese and pickle.
Cheese and pickle.
I don't remember exactly what was in it, but it was just your average picnic fare. We had an unusual first meeting. We met online, and we'd been talking quite a bit and talking on the phone, and we decided we wanted to meet up. Both of us almost didn't go. You almost moved back to England. I almost cancelled the date because I couldn't be bothered. I was fed up with dating.
I'd been in Edinburgh for a year, kind of coming to the end of my. I think it was more related to the business because I was finding it incredibly difficult where I was to source stock to basically earn an income, and I had no problems with doing that when I was back home. I was like, right, well, I actually did have people go and look at 2 properties for me in Lincoln, and this would have been round about September. So I moved to Edinburgh in the August of 2015, and I was like, right, well, this is not working out, so I'm off back. It was incredibly expensive to move to Edinburgh, so it wasn't. That's why I was procrastinating over it, because it was like, oh, I've got to move everything back. So I had one person that I knew in Lincoln go and have a look at 2 properties for me, and they fell through. So I was kind of resigned to the fact that I might be spending at least till after Christmas in Edinburgh. Then the online dating account that I had long since transpired, or I wasn't.
You weren't looking.
I wasn't monitoring it. I wasn't interested in it. I was just busy doing other things. I was working for that charity at the time, so I was doing all that. And then I just got a notice, I think, or a message, which again is by chance that I looked at and saw, because, like I said, I wasn't monitoring it. I wasn't looking at any of the emails or anything that was coming through that. I don't know if there was a message from you or an alert. We ended up talking. Or if we move up to our first date, there's a place bigger in Scotland.
Well,
the Borders. Is it the Borders?
I think it's South Lanarkshire actually, but yeah, it's in the Borders. But it's worth saying that in Scotland we have something called the Right to Roam Act, which means that trespassing laws are very much a grey area. This is why we're allowed to go around these old buildings that we go and explore. So long as you're sensible about, shutting gates and keeping livestock in and not going into people's gardens, you can go wherever you like in Scotland. You hadn't done any of that, and I'd done quite a bit of it. I got the bug for it when I was in Canada when we went hunting one year for deer down on the border between Montana and Alberta, a little abandoned township. I was just fascinated by it, this sort of Old West. There was an old schoolhouse with like a rotten piano in there, and it's just so cool. But this one place in near Biggar, the house it was fairly intact.
Well, the roof was still on it.
At that point it was. Apparently the owner of it had inherited it. He'd come back from living in Australia and he'd inherited it from his dad or his granddad, and his granddad hadn't put any money into it, hadn't looked after it at all. His grandmother was the last person to live in it and they were separated, so I guess that's why his grandfather didn't want to look after it.
This is a massive Scottish baronial...
It was a hunting lodge.
Yeah, it was, what would you say, bedroom-wise? 10 bedrooms?
Yeah, something like that.
But it was built in 1887, it says, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
So it was a typical, like I said, like baronial hunting lodge, but massive, and turreted and all that kind of thing.
I'd been in it a couple of times before with my friend Mandy, and I was telling you about it, and we thought that would be somewhere to go. So we went. It was an incredible building. The kitchen still had the massive big cast iron range cooker. And do you remember the sort of duck egg blue all over the wooden furniture in the kitchen? And some parts of the house were already crumbling and you couldn't really get to them.
But that was the floors, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The floors were giving away upstairs because the water was getting in by then. But
yeah, because the grandfather hadn't boarded up any of the windows or anything, so people just come along and smash them and then the water gets in and that's the end of it. That's the end of the life of the building. If he'd have taken the time to do that building would still be standing.
It was a stunning, stunning building.
The staircase, do you remember the grand staircase? Yeah. This incredible heavily carved Victorian staircase. Just beautiful.
I remember we found that plaque in one of the rooms.
In the front entry hall, up above the piano.
Erected because the Polish troops during the Second World War were billeted in there.
Yeah. And that happened a lot to a lot of these old houses. They had troops in them because these kind of buildings they were heavily taxed after the war, weren't they? And a lot of the landowners then, the wealthy people that owned them.
Well, a lot of that taxation kicked in after the First World War.
Right.
That's when they were all. I mean, they covered this in Downton Abbey, didn't they? Huge amount of taxation that caused and inheritance tax.
Inheritance tax, that's right.
Which caused many of these places to become insolvent.
And a lot of them, you'll find, just happened to burn down. And that's obviously people collecting on insurance.
Yeah.
So a lot of them are skeletons, but they're still fascinating. It's fascinating to look round. But this one place was so cool for a rummage round. Nothing left in there. Well, actually, that's not true. One of the rooms was full of sort of... it had an old cooker and some old bed frames and old chairs. Remember, 1970s chairs. It's a shame because if they had, we were saying when we were walking around it, I know it's a shame to tear out the heart of the house, like the staircase, but that staircase would have been worth a fortune.
The whole place, from a point of view of architectural salvage, was worth a fortune. Just moving on with this, it's now the roof's gone, the floors have all gone, it's completely now collapsed. Because we're talking 8 years ago.
But my point was, if they'd have sold some of the architecture they could have.
I said that to you when we was walking around.
Fixed the roof.
When we walked around there, I was like, this place is worth an absolute fortune just in the architectural salvage. If no one's doing anything with it, why aren't all these fixtures and fittings being shipped out? They would have made money from all this.
Yeah,
they would have made a fortune if they'd have dealt with the local salvage dealers to just come in there and just take whatever they wanted, pay them for it, and then let the place fall to bits. Because now it's going to be a shell. Everything is going to have collapsed in the... Well, we know it has. Everything's collapsed into the middle of it. That's it.
It's done.
It doesn't take long.
I'm happy we got to see it when we did. I remember in one of the bedrooms upstairs, it was kind of like the main bedroom. Half of the floor was sagging, but you could walk around the other half and get to the bay windows. And I just happened to look behind one of the shutters, and there was a cupboard behind one of the shutters, and it was full of 1920s medicine bottles. I was able to date them because one of them was actually a veterinary medicine bottle, and the name of the guy, I recognised it, and he was bigger in the 20s. So...
Isa, she wants to get on the podcast.
Attention seeking.
Well, I remember there's a really good museum in Biggar, and Biggar is a tiny little place. I mean, you drive through it in 30 seconds, but it had its own museum. And we went in there, didn't we? We said to them, there's all this stuff, because they had a big section of the museum was about the Polish troops being billeted in the area. And we told them about that commemorative plaque.
Yeah.
And they should get it. But, in the end, no one really cares. Can't be bothered. It's all too much hassle.
Last time I was there, I think it might have been you and I that walked around there. They'd painted the front door in this derelict building with everything collapsed inside. You know, you can see the sky through all of the windows now. But they painted the front door.
What that was all about.
Yeah, we went and had a good explore in there, and then went and sat on the front step. So there used to be terraces out the front. Get out, off you go.
That's the cat going out the cat park.
We went out and sat on the front step and had a picnic. Kath asked, what instrument did you used to play? You mentioned you were in a band at one stage.
Drummer.
What age did you start drumming at?
12. I perceived that from that age. I don't know how long I put into it.
Inspired by what music?
I just wanted to be a drummer in a band. And that's all I was focused on. I was focused on being a musician for a long time. I quit completely. I just walked away from it all around about 2002 because it wasn't going anywhere. So that's when I decided to focus on the clothing business. And that came about because obviously being in a band and playing indie related, you know, English rock music, and with that came a certain look. And all the clothes that I had were all 70s, 60s, 70s vintage. And to pay the bills after that, it became semi-professional. I mean, we'll talk about this in another podcast. But it went as far as it could. We never got any music in the charts or anything like that. But when it came to an end, I decided to sell my vintage clothing online, and that's where the inspiration came from for the vintage and period clothing, just from that. But yes, I was a drummer. I still got my kit. Kit's actually in the chicken shed right now. Will it ever come out? Probably not.
Well, other Janice wanted to know if I make jams and jellies and preserves, and if we've got any merchandise that we would sell. I have made preserves. Not for a while though.
I haven't tasted any of them. When did you make preserves? I'm not calling you a liar.
I've done canning when we were at the last place. Do you remember the canned vegetables that I made? The canned, like the piccalilli and
yeah, I remember the piccalilli.
chopped tomatoes.
That was quite nice, yeah.
Homemade canned tomatoes are absolutely delicious. And yeah, definitely we'll get around to doing it here. And merchandise, we haven't really thought about it. People comment on the photography. And we should do stuff with the photography, and we should. But do you not have to be?
Well, to get a merch store on YouTube, I think you have to have 100,000 followers.
I'm not sure.
Well, it's 50 or 100,000 to actually have a merch store, and we're a long way from that. It's the time element. It's with everything else that you're doing. If we were to do something like that, it would have to be done right. With some other YouTube channels, they can do all this because they've got an infrastructure behind them doing it. Do you know what I mean? It's like they've been doing it a while, and but the other thing is also you got to ask yourself what you're doing it for. Yes, people would like some form of merchandise, and yes, from our point of view, the extra income from that would be great. But when it's being done just for that reason, I get a bit like, do you know what I mean?
No. What?
Well, just doing something to make money from it in that way. Just, you're producing this stuff. Our motivation to produce it, yeah. It's like, where's that motivation coming from?
Yeah, okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not I'm not that much of a breadhead. I'm not that much inclined to just keep doing all these different types of things just to bring in money. I've always been a person I'm far more interested in my free time and doing what I want to do with that free time rather than spend it just to make some more money. You're the one that would do, because of the creative side of you, if something creative involved in creating this merchandise, you would then do it. But from my point of view, it's like I wouldn't really be involved in that because It's just not something that I'm that interested in. And the only motivation, would, from my point of view, would be to do it for money, and then it's ruined. It just gets ruined from that point.
Yeah, it's something to think about.
With tea towels with my face on it.
It's like the two old ladies in the Truman Show with Truman's face on a pillow, on a cushion.
So it's just like, that's what I think of when people say merchandise. And I know it's not what they're thinking, but it's just where my mind goes to.
Yeah, and what if people don't buy them? Then we're left with
10,000 tea towels with my face on it.
You could stitch them together and make a flag. Just put it at the top of the island.
It's the owners might have something to say about that.
Well, I can understand the calendar, certainly being a practical, useful thing, but also like a little reminder of the beautiful nature that's out there, you know, and the sentiment that people tend to take away from our videos, which is uplifting, inspiring, peaceful. You having a glimpse of that on your wall, I could see that would be nice for some people.
But what's interesting is when you do something like we've done with this channel, and it's come from the place that it has.
The unexpected nature of it, you mean?
Yeah, and then the interest. It's difficult. Just speaking from my own perspective, not from yours. I can't, because we're the ones that are living here and living a life and filming what we're doing, and what we're doing is just filming what we're doing while we're here, and people are enjoying following that journey and that process. My relationship to it is completely different to the people that are watching.
And that's why it makes you feel uncomfortable thinking about merchandise.
Yeah, because this is our life.
Do, 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 do.
But it is, and it's like it's just then it's like merchandising our life.
But then, like Jerry was saying, it's, you know, some other channels it ends up just being the me show, which we never wanted.
It's just I don't, you know, I'd rather I would run away from it if that started happening. My relationship with what we do, and I can only speak for myself here, is different to the people viewing it, and it's the creative process. When you create something and you put it out there and people enjoy it, that's a bonus. The actual thing itself is the creating of it.
But see, I'm probably, because of that, like I enjoy the creative process of filming things and you know, writing the narration and telling the stories and reflecting on what to say. But you're away editing, stuck in that bunker all day, the day before it goes out, and I'm excited to watch the next episode. I'm one of the viewers in that way.
When you create the episode, when you put it together, when you've seen that footage as much as you have to, and you've listened to it, and then you've re-edited it, and then you've thought about it a bit more, and you might tweak this and change that, whatever. And when you've spent, you know, numerous hours doing that, you have a completely different relationship to it. But then saying that, you know, friends of mine, they all watch it, and they're avid watchers of it. They watch every episode, and they're completely up to date with it. Like the moment it comes out, they'll sit and watch it. And I've turned around to them and said, well, yeah, if one of you made a channel, of course I'd be watching it. Of course I'd be sat there in front of it. And if one of those was making the Scottish Isle, of course I would be watching it. But I just think from my point of view, I'm so close to it, I'm such like in the middle of it, that once an episode is created, I never watch them back.
Mm-hmm.
I never...
So yeah, different. We're coming at it from different perspectives.
Yeah. Probably labouring the point, but it's just, yeah. No, what I'm doing is I do it with absolutely everything. I'm overthinking it.
Yes, you're an overthinker.
Yeah, but I'd rather be an overthinker than an idiot.
Than an underthinker. You're not.
Idiot.
I don't think you're allowed to call them idiots these days. You have to call them underthinkers.
Oh, okay. Is that the modern, the contemporary parlance now is no one's an idiot. You're an underthinker.
Yeah, an underthinker. That's one for a T-shirt, isn't it?
Well, is there anything else? Any of the comments? Well,
that was it. That was the questions.
Well, we've got to wind it up because we you know, as we know, with upload times and everything, I want to put a decent audio quality out. Is there anything else? Okay? Let's end. Yeah, with I don't think if we had any negative comments. I'm just thinking about the funniest one because we always get a really funny negative comment.
Lots of. There was a big thread
yeah.
of conversation about safety gear. Yes, there's been a lot of anxiety from the last video about PPE, and I was going to say I think sometimes people forget that we can't just nip to B&Q and pick up a face mask.
We completely understand that it's coming from the right place. Yeah, these people are just concerned when they see these things. But the fact is, if we haven't got any masks, we haven't got any masks. And if we haven't got the right gear, and we haven't got the right gear for pretty much everything.
Yeah, we're
because
just
we've got to
making do.
accumulate. But this is the thing, it's like, we're not wealthy. We don't have an abundance of tools to do the kind of work that we're doing in this cottage. We have for a normal house, but not for something like this. So we're always coming across things that we don't have. We're just filming what we're doing. We're not creating content. Well, there comes the rain again.
What's the line?
Falling on my head like a memory. Something about like a new emotion.
That's it. Well, that's it's time, isn't it?
Yes, we're going to have to wrap it up.